Ethan Walker had everything a billionaire in New York could want except a cure for his daughter Lily, whose mysterious paralysis was stealing her life day by day. Doctors failed, hope faded, and desperation grew. Then one night, a starving homeless boy named No stepped forward with an impossible promise: "Give me food and I'll save your daughter." Ethan Walker had lived most of his life believing that money could solve anything. Born into old wealth and later multiplying it through ruthless business decisions, he had built a reputation across New York as a man who didn't break, didn't bend, and never lost control. Penthouse views of the skyline, private jets, art collections worth more than small countries — none of it impressed him anymore. What mattered, what truly mattered, was slipping through his fingers faster than he could grasp it. His daughter Lily, once a whirlwind of energy and joy, was now trapped in a wheelchair, her strength fading day after day, while the most brilliant doctors in the country stared at her charts with confusion in their eyes. No specialist at Mount Sinai, Columbia Presbyterian, or Johns Hopkins could explain the rapid deterioration of her muscles. Every test came back clean, every theory collapsed, and every proposed treatment ended in failure. For the first time in his life, Ethan faced a problem he couldn't throw money at. Desperation settled into him like a permanent winter. Each morning he entered Lily's room, hoping to see even the smallest improvement, only to find her sitting quietly near the window, her hands trembling whenever she tried to lift her favorite book. Her smile, once bright enough to lift his worst days, now carried exhaustion beyond her age. She was only 10 and already fighting something no one could identify. Ethan would sit beside her, brushing a strand of golden hair from her forehead, pretending to be composed. But when Lily asked him whether she'd ever run again or dance again, he felt something inside him crumble. He told her yes, of course she would, that the doctors just needed a little more time. But he didn't believe it, and she could feel the heaviness in his voice. Nights were the worst. After she fell asleep, Ethan spent hours scrolling through medical journals, obscure research, alternative medicine forums, anything that might offer a clue. He had hired experts from Europe, Asia, even a neurologist from Israel known for solving medical mysteries. Every one of them left his penthouse with the same helpless expression, and as the weeks passed, Lily's world grew smaller. Her legs stopped responding, her appetite dwindled. She barely had the strength to lift a fork. Watching her fade was torture, and Ethan found himself replaying every moment he hadn't been there for her, every missed school event, every canceled weekend trip because of business, every time he'd chosen a meeting over bedtime stories. Now he would give anything, everything to go back. But life didn't work that way. And the thought of losing her tightened around his heart like a metal band. The media caught wind of the mysterious illness of the Walker Harris, and gossip outlets feasted on it. Photos of Ethan carrying Lily into medical buildings circulated online, spawning endless speculation. Some called it a rare degenerative disease. Others spun conspiracies about genetic experiments gone wrong. Ethan didn't care what they said about him, but he hated that Lily's suffering had become entertainment for strangers. Still, he kept searching. He pushed his influence, his connections, his bank accounts to their limits. He didn't care about the price. His daughter's life was the only thing that mattered. The world of New York's elite whispered behind his back, some pitying him, others waiting for him to break. But Ethan refused to show weakness in public. He walked into every board meeting, every charity gala, every high-profile event with the same calculating calm he had mastered over the years. Only those closest to him saw the fracture beneath the surface, the way he clenched his jaw while checking his phone every 5 minutes. The haunted look when someone mentioned children, the tense urgency whenever a doctor called. He was losing her, and he knew it. One evening when Lily struggled even to hold a spoon, he made a decision. He would take her to dinner, no matter how difficult the logistics. She deserved to feel normal, even for a moment. So he arranged a table at the Imperial Crown, one of Manhattan's most exclusive restaurants. The staff went into full alert. A private entrance was prepared, security tightened, and the chef set aside ingredients for a personalized meal suitable for Lily's limited appetite. When they arrived, the chandeliers glowed like constellations suspended from the ceiling. White linens, crystal glassware, and soft orchestral music created a serene atmosphere meant to comfort guests, but Ethan couldn't relax. He watched Lily struggle to lift her water glass. He watched her push food around her plate, unable to take more than a few bites. And with each passing minute, the weight on his chest intensified. He pretended to smile, to be strong for her, but his mind raced with fear. Every tremble in her fingers felt like another countdown. Every small wince felt like another piece slipping away. The restaurant filled with wealthy families, couples celebrating anniversaries, investors discussing deals, people whose biggest problem that night was drinking too much champagne or choosing between lobster and filet mignon. Ethan felt distant from them, as though he were sitting behind glass while the rest of the world continued unaffected. His daughter's life was unraveling, yet everyone else moved forward effortlessly. Then Lily's fork slipped from her hand and clattered onto the plate. She whispered a quiet apology, her cheeks flushing with embarrassment. Ethan reached over and held her hand, telling her it was okay, but the moment carved a deep H inside him. She was fading right in front of him, and he couldn't stop it. Not with influence, not with money. Not with all the power he had spent his life building. That was the moment he realized he was willing to break every rule, upend every empire, and sacrifice every last dollar he owned if it meant Lily could stand again. He would tear the world apart for her if he had to. What he didn't know, what he couldn't have imagined, was the answer to saving her life wouldn't come from a doctor, a specialist, or a team of research. It would walk through the doors of the imperial crown in the form of a hungry boy in ragged clothes who dared to speak to him the one sentence no one else had the courage to say. And that sentence would change everything. The moment Ethan lifted Lily's fork from the floor, a murmur stirred near the entrance of the imperial crown. At first he barely registered it. The staff here operated like a flawlessly tuned orchestra, and small disturbances were typically resolved before most guests even noticed. But this time the noise grew a ripple of confusion that didn't match the restaurant's usual polished atmosphere. Ethan glanced up, irritation sharpening his features as a hostess approached with quick, uncertain steps. She whispered to the restaurant manager, who stiffened, then hurried toward Ethan's table with a strained look that immediately put him on alert. He had dealt with countless emergencies, but something about this man's hesitance bothered him. "Miff. Walker," the manager said, choosing his words carefully, "I apologize for the inconvenience, but there's a situation at the front entrance." Ethan's jaw twitched. "What sort of situation?" The manager swallowed. "A boy, a homeless boy. He refuses to leave. He says he needs to speak with you, personally." Lily's head tilted slightly, curiosity peeking through her fatigue. Ethan's irritation deepened. In the past few months, dozens of swindlers had tried to approach him, self-proclaimed healers, energy readers, self-taught miracle doctors, even someone who claimed to communicate with cellular vibrations. Each one had preyed on the desperation surrounding his daughter's illness. He was done with manipulators. "Remove him," Ethan said. "Politely if possible." "We tried, sir. He insists it's about your daughter." Those last words struck Ethan like a small, calculated blow. His fingers curled around the edge of the table. To exploit Lily as a way to get his attention was a low tactic even for New York's con artists. Before he could respond, the restaurant doors swung open and 2 security guards stepped inside, escorting a small figure between them. The boy couldn't have been older than 12. His clothes were oversized, ragged, and layered for warmth rather than style. His hair was messy and his face carried the grime of city streets. Yet his eyes, sharp, dark, unusually steady, were focused directly on Ethan in a way that startled him. This boy didn't look afraid. He looked determined. The guards tried to push him back. "Hey kid, enough. You gotta go." But the boy dug his heels into the polished marble floor. "I need to talk to him," he insisted, his voice cracking but firm, pointing at Ethan with an urgency that caught several diners' attention. "It's about his daughter." Ethan stood abruptly, unwilling to let his child's suffering become the center of a spectacle. "That's enough," he snapped, waving the guards forward. "Get him out." But before they could move, Lily's small voice drifted across the room. Wait, even sick and exhausted, she still held a soft authority that could pierce Ethan's defenses. He looked at her. She gazed back at him with pleading eyes, the kind she used whenever she wanted him to reconsider something. "Dad, maybe listen, please." Ethan hesitated. His instinct told him to shield her from every charlatan, every stranger with an agenda. But another instinct, the one fueled by his growing fear of losing her, whispered that dismissing any possibility, no matter how absurd, might be a mistake. He signaled for the guards to pause. "Fine," Ethan said tightly. "Let him speak." Briefly, the guards released the boy, who straightened his backpack straps and stepped forward. Every table in the restaurant seemed to tilt its attention toward them, curiosity crackling through the air. The boy pointed to Lily, sitting in her chair with trembling hands resting on her lap. His next words sliced through the room with clarity. "Give me food," he said, "and I'll save your daughter." For several seconds the world seemed to freeze. Conversations halted. Forks hovered midair, even the music felt suspended. Ethan stared at the boy as if trying to dissect him, looking for a lie, a smirk. Some sign that this was nothing more than an act designed to tug at a desperate father's wallet. He'd heard promises like this before, but never from a child. A homeless kid offering to cure a disease that stumped the most advanced specialists in the world. It sounded absurd, ridiculous, insulting. But before Ethan could react, the boy held his gaze with startling steadiness. "I'm serious. I can help her. I just need a meal." Several diners snickered under their breath. A wealthy couple nearby exchanged looks as though watching a bizarre scene from a low-budget drama. But Ethan didn't laugh. Something about the kid's tone, direct, honest, almost wary, shook him more than he wanted to admit. He leaned closer. "You can cure her." The boy nodded once. "Yes, in exchange for food, just one meal." Ethan studied him carefully, examining every twitch and detail. The boy's clothes were torn, but his posture wasn't defeated. His eyes didn't dart around like someone searching for an escape route. He stood like someone who expected resistance but wasn't afraid of it. Someone who had walked through far worse things than a room full of people judging him. Ethan exhaled slowly, more shaken than he expected. "What's your name?" "No, Reed." Lily smiled faintly at him, the kind of smile that made Ethan's heart tighten. "Hi, No," she said softly. No's expression softened, but only slightly. His attention stayed focused on Ethan, waiting. The manager leaned in nervously. "Mr. Walker, should we call the police?" Ethan didn't answer immediately. He glanced at Lily, whose weak hands now rested over her stomach. Her eyes sparkled not with energy but with hope. And hope had become a rare and fragile thing in their home. Ethan turned back to No and made a decision that felt reckless yet unavoidable. Bring him a menu. The gasp that rippled across the restaurant went ignored. The manager retrieved a menu and handed it to No with visible reluctance, as though expecting the boy to order the most expensive item just to prove Ethan a fool. Instead, No studied the menu with careful eyes before quietly saying, "I just need a plate of rice, some beans, and a small piece of meat. And if possible, can you pack half of it to go?" That request hit Ethan harder than anything else the boy had said. A child who had the chance to ask for lobster, steak, or anything else from one of the most prestigious restaurants in Manhattan had chosen the simplest meal on the list and wanted to save half for later. Ethan felt something shift inside him. This wasn't the behavior of a manipulator. This was a child who needed to survive. A child who carried burden after burden with no safety net. "Why do you think you can help my daughter?" Ethan asked quietly. No didn't hesitate. "Because I've seen someone sick the same way, and I know what's doing this to her." Ethan's breath caught. For the first time in months, a flicker of possibility sparked within him, warring against years of skepticism. "What is it?" No looked at Lily, then back at Ethan. "I'll tell you," he said, "after I eat." And just like that, the story that would change all of their lives began with a simple plate of food and a desperate promise in the middle of one of New York's most luxurious restaurants. No ate with the quiet efficiency of someone who had mastered the art of rationing every bite. Ethan watched him closely, trying to decipher the boy's intentions through each measured movement. Lily, meanwhile, followed No's motions with soft fascination, her fingers curled loosely around her napkin. The restaurant remained unusually tense. Wealthy guests who normally cared only about themselves now found their conversations drifting back toward the unexpected scene at the center of the room. Some whispered about Ethan's supposed vulnerability, others about the audacity of a homeless child approaching a billionaire in such a direct way. But Ethan couldn't care less about them. His focus remained locked on No. There was something in this boy's demeanor that refused to align with the categories Ethan's mind tried to place him in. Homeless children Ethan had encountered through charity events or foundation visits often carried the defeated slump of those who had surrendered to hardship far too young. No carried a different energy. His back stayed straight, his expression sharp, his eyes constantly assessing the world around him with a practicality beyond his age. He wasn't cowed by the glittering decor or the stares from wealthy diners. He behaved as though none of it mattered. As though he was here for one reason only, and that reason was sitting in a wheelchair at the end of the table, watching him with cautious curiosity. "Is the food okay?" Lily asked in a gentle voice, almost fragile from exhaustion. No swallowed and nodded. "It's good, thank you." She offered a small smile. It was faint but bright enough to bring a soft H to Ethan's chest. Moments like these, normal, simple, human, had grown rare since her illness began consuming her. The boy finished half of his plate and carefully slid the other half into the takeout box the staff provided. He sealed it, placed it inside his worn backpack, then wiped his hands on a napkin with deliberate precision. Only then did he look at Ethan with a seriousness that felt far too heavy for someone his age. "You said you've seen someone with her symptoms," Ethan began, eliminating any need for pleasantries. "Who?" No's eyes shifted to Lily for a few seconds before returning to Ethan. "A girl I knew. Her name was Maya. She got sick out of nowhere, just like your daughter." Lily leaned slightly forward, her eyes widening. "What happened to her?" No hesitated, and the pause carried weight. "She got better," he finally answered. "But only after we figured out what was really making her sick." "And what was that?" Ethan's tone sharpened. He wanted details, facts, anything concrete. No took a breath. Something in her house, something that looked safe but wasn't. Ethan's heartbeat quickened. A toxin, mold, environmental exposure. No shook his head. Not exactly. It was a plant. The word struck Ethan like a sudden crack of thunder. Lily looked confused. A plant made her sick. No nodded. It can happen. Some plants look harmless, but they're not. Maya got weak fast. Her legs stopped working. Doctors didn't believe it at first because the symptoms didn't match anything they understood. But once we removed the plant and cleaned the space, she started recovering. Lily's eyebrows pulled together. What did the plant look like? Long thin leaves, said, soft texture, dark green. It grows well indoors. People use it for decoration because it looks elegant and it's easy to maintain. Ethan felt the prickling onset of dread climbing his spine. Do you know the plant's name? People call it memory leaf. No answered. Not everyone knows what it really does. But if someone's sensitive to it, or if they are around it too long, it can make them very sick. Ethan stared at him, the gears of horror clicking together in his mind. His penthos, specifically Lily's room, featured meticulously arranged indoor plants curated by one of Manhattan's leading botanical designers. He remembered signing off on the installation. He remembered praising its natural aesthetic. He remembered how Lily once loved the gentle green touch it added to her space. And now, without warning, the image of a specific plant flashed into his mind. Long, slender leaves, a deep, elegant green. He remembered Lily brushing her fingers along its edges, saying it reminded her of a ribbon. The restaurant seemed to tilt. Describe the leaves again, Ethan demanded, his voice dropping into a low, dangerous register. No, repeated the features. Ethan's pulse slammed against his ribcage. That plant, whatever it was still in Lily's room. If this is true, Ethan's voice trembled with controlled fury. If what you're saying is even close to accurate, No broke in with a steady conviction. It's true. And if that plant is in your home, she needs to stay away from it. How long does it take for symptoms to show? Ethan asked. Depends on the person, No said. For Maya, it happened fast. For others, it can take weeks. But once it settles into someone's system, they get weaker fast, legs first, then apathy, then energy, drains them. Lily's small voice cut through the tension. Dad, do you think that's what's happening to me? Ethan didn't answer right away. He didn't want to frighten her, but he also couldn't ignore the growing weight in his chest. No leaned toward her with surprising gentleness. I'm not saying it's exactly the same, but I know what I saw. And I'm pretty sure you've been around something that's hurting you. The restaurant manager hovered nearby, unsure whether to intervene or continue pretending to manage other guests while eavesdropping. Ethan turned to him abruptly. Have the car brought around, now. The manager nodded and rushed away. Noah zipped his backpack and stepped back as though ready to leave, assuming his part in this story was over. But Ethan wasn't done. You're coming with us, Ethan said. Noah's brows lifted. Why? Because if you know what you're talking about, I need you to see Lily's room. I need confirmation. I won't waste time guessing. Noah hesitated only briefly before nodding once. Okay. Lily smiled at him again, a grateful, fragile expression that made Noah's gaze soften. Ethan paid the bill without glancing at the amount, then surprisingly offered his hand to help Lily navigate her wheelchair toward the private exit, something he rarely allowed staff to do. No followed closely, stepping outside into the cool night air that smelled faintly of street food, rain-soaked pavement, and the undercurrent of city life. As the car pulled up, sleek and black with tinted windows, Ethan ushered Lily inside before turning to No. You said you've seen this before, he repeated. If you're lying, I'm not, No said firmly. I wouldn't joke about someone's life. Not hers. Ethan exhaled, his expression torn between suspicion and reluctant belief. He motioned for No to get in. No climbed into the car, the leather seats far softer than anything he'd ever sat on. Lily leaned toward him, her voice soft but full of trust. Thank you for helping, No. He met her eyes. I'll do whatever I can. As the car sped off toward the Walker Penthos, Ethan felt the shaky spark of something he hadn't felt in months, something he barely dared acknowledge. Not certainty, not relief, but possibility, and possibility, however fragile, was enough to pull him forward into the unknown. The drive from the Imperial Crown to the Walker Penthos cut through the glowing arteries of Manhattan, a blur of city light streaking across the black windows of the luxury SUV. Ethan sat forward in his seat the entire time, his elbows on his knees, hands clasped tight as though bracing for impact. Lily rested beside him, her head leaning gently against the leather cushion, exhaustion tugging her eyelids down. Yet every few minutes she glanced toward No, who sat across from her with his backpack clutched tightly against his chest. He watched the world outside the window with a strange mixture of alertness and detachment. The way someone who had slept on sidewalks learned to observe everything without appearing to look too closely. Each passing street lamp illuminated details Ethan hadn't noticed earlier, faint scars across No's knuckles, the frayed stitching on his backpack strap, the determined set of his jaw that didn't match his age. The city never slept, yet inside the car a thick stillness settled over the four of them. Ethan's driver took the quickest route through Midtown, gliding past neon billboards and steaming subway grates, weaving through late-night taxis. The hum of the engine filled the silence while Ethan's mind raced through every corner of the penthouse, replaying images of the plants decorating Lily's room. He remembered asking the designer to make the space more alive, thinking the greenery would bring comfort. Now the memory felt like a terrible oversight. With each block they passed, the dread coiled deeper inside him. Halfway through the drive, Lily shifted slightly and looked at No. "How did you figure out the plant was hurting your friend?" she asked. Her voice was weak, but her curiosity gave it shape. No turned his attention to her with a seriousness that felt far too heavy for a boy his age. "She got sick a lot," he said. "No one knew why. We tried doctors, clinics, even some community volunteers who knew about plants. But nothing helped. One night I stayed at her place because she was scared to sleep alone. I kept waking up feeling weird, like my head was heavy and my legs didn't want to move right." He paused, the memory flickering across his expression. "Next morning I noticed the plant near her bed smelled strange. Not strong, but different. Maya said it had always been there, but she never paid attention to it. I took a leaf to a botanist who helped at a shelter sometimes. He told me the plant was dangerous, especially for kids." Lily looked at him, wide-eyed. "So you saved her?" No shrugged slightly, but the humility in the gesture only made his bravery more striking. "I just helped her get away from what was hurting her. After that she got better." Ethan absorbed the story with a growing sense of unease. His daughter's symptoms mirrored everything No had described. The weakness, the fading appetite, the trembling fingers, the steady decline without explanation. And now, the idea that something he had placed in her room, something he thought would bring her comfort, could be responsible for her suffering made his stomach churn. He felt a sharp sting of guilt that he tried and failed to swallow. The car slowed as it approached the Walker Building, a glass tower rising above the neighborhood with a cold, commanding presence. The elegant canopy at the front entrance was lit with soft golden lights, and a uniformed doorman stepped forward as soon as the SUV rolled to a stop. Ethan exited first, extending a hand to help Lily out of the car and into her wheelchair. No stepped out slowly, glancing at the towering building with a mix of awe and caution. This wasn't just a home. It was a fortress of wealth, the kind of place No had only ever seen from a distance. The doorman opened the doors with a respectful nod. "Evening, Mr. Walker." Ethan barely acknowledged him, his focus locked on Lily and the burning urgency that fueled each step toward the private elevator. Once inside, the elevator began its smooth ascent toward the top floors. Lily sat quietly in her wheelchair while Ethan pressed the button for the penthouse. No shifted his weight uneasily, clearly aware of the contrast between his worn shoes and the elevator's mirrored walls and marble floors. The soft overhead lighting cast shadows beneath his eyes, revealing a fatigue that came from years of surviving on the streets. When the doors opened, the penthouse greeted them with its sweeping views of Manhattan. Floor-to-ceiling windows revealed a skyline dotted with skyscrapers and blinking lights. The air carried a faint scent of lavender and cedar from the automated diffusers, but beneath that pleasant aroma, No detected something else, something faint and vaguely unsettling. He narrowed his eyes slightly as he stepped inside, scanning the space like a detective entering a crime scene. Ethan guided Lily's wheelchair across the polished hardwood floor, moving straight toward her room. He didn't speak, didn't pause to remove his coat. He needed answers, needed them now. No followed close behind, his hand clutching the backpack strap as though grounding himself. Each room they passed showcased Ethan's wealth, designer furniture, curated art pieces, a grand piano no one touched, shelves lined with books that had never been opened. But No barely noticed any of it. His attention was drawn to the faint tension vibrating through the air. When they reached Lily's room, Ethan stopped outside the door. His hand hovered over the handle for a moment before he finally turned it. The door opened to reveal a beautifully decorated bedroom, filled with soft pastel colors and delicate fairy lights. Stuffed animals lined the window seat, and on the far side of the room, next to Lily's bed, stood a tall decorative planter overflowing with lush green leaves. Long, elegant, deep green leaves. No inhaled sharply, "That's it." The words struck the air like a punch. Ethan's heart hammered against his ribs as he stepped closer to the plant. Its leaves shimmered under the glow of the bedside lamp, glossy and vibrant. Beautiful, yet now that he looked closely, unnerving. "You sure?" Ethan asked, though his voice carried the brittle edge of someone who already knew the answer. "Yes," No said, stepping forward. "That's memory leaf. I'd bet everything on it. You need to get it out of here." Lily reached toward the plant with a trembling hand, confusion etched across her face. "Dad, that plant's been here for months." Ethan felt the weight of those words crash against him. Months of exposure, months of weakening health, months of decline he couldn't explain. He clenched his jaw to steady the storm rising within him. "I'm calling security," Ethan said. "They'll remove it immediately." No shook his head quickly. "Don't touch it with your bare hands. Its oils can stay on your skin and spread to whatever you touch next. Use gloves and seal the planter before moving it." Ethan stared at him, startled by how confident and knowledgeable the boy sounded. "How do you know all of this?" No's expression darkened with something old, something shaped by years of being forced to learn things the hard way. "Because nobody else helped Maya, I had to figure it out myself." Lily's voice quivered. "Dad, will I get better if we take it away?" Ethan knelt beside her and took her hand gently. For the first time in months, he didn't have to lie. "We're going to do everything we can," he said, his voice rough with emotion. "And we're restarting right now." As he stood again, a spark ignited inside him, not rage, not panic, but a fierce resolve. Whoever had placed that plant in Lily's room had endangered his little girl, and he intended to find out why. Tonight they would remove it. Tomorrow he would uncover the truth. And whoever was responsible would face consequences beyond anything they could imagine. Ethan moved faster than he had in years. The moment No warned him about touching the plant, he strode out of Lily's room with a focus so sharp it could have sliced through steel. His footsteps echoed across the penthouse floors as he headed to the utility closet near the kitchen. He flung it open, grabbed thick rubber gloves, a roll of heavy-duty plastic, and duct tape, all while his pulse thundered in his ears. Behind him, No remained near the bedroom doorway with Lily, who watched her father with a fragile mixture of hope and fear. She had never seen him like this. The calm, collected billionaire who negotiated multi-million-dollar deals without blinking now moved with a frantic urgency fueled by pure paternal instinct. Ethan returned within seconds. He slipped on the gloves, peeled a long sheet of plastic from the roll, and approached the tall planter like someone defusing an explosive device. No guided him from a careful distance, pointing out the safest way to wrap the plant, emphasizing the importance of sealing the base so none of the soil could spill. Ethan followed every instruction, and once the plant was completely cocooned in plastic, he wrapped layer after layer of duct tape around it. Only when he was certain nothing could escape did he lift the oversized bundle. Despite the gloves, despite the layers of plastic, fury surged inside him. Someone had placed this poisonous thing in his daughter's room. Someone had knowingly endangered her life, and he intended to find out who. He carried the sealed plant through the hallway, each step fueled by the rising storm within him. The building's private incinerator room was 2 floors below, accessible only through a locked service elevator. As he waited for the elevator doors to open, the realization sank deeper. This wasn't an accident. The designer who curated Lily's room knew the source of every plant they ordered. They had cataloged each species, checked compatibility, and cross-referenced them with indoor safety guidelines. A toxic plant didn't appear by mistake. The elevator dinged, the doors slid open, and Ethan stepped inside with the plastic-wrapped plant. As the elevator descended, the tension in his jaw tightened until it hurt. By the time he reached the incinerator room, he was no longer desperate or afraid, he was enraged. He unlocked the steel door, tossed the plant inside the disposal chute, and activated the shredding system. A grinding roar echoed through the room as the blades tore through the plastic, soil, and leaves. It wasn't enough to destroy the evidence, but it was enough to eliminate the immediate threat to Lily. Minutes later, he emerged from the service area and re-entered the private elevator. His breathing slowed, but the anger continued to simmer beneath his stern facade. Whoever had done this would pay. Not with money he could replace money. They would pay with consequences that reshaped their future entirely. When he returned to the penthouse, Lily was resting in her wheelchair while No knelt beside her, talking softly to distract her. She looked up immediately when Ethan walked in. "Did you get rid of it?" she asked. Her voice held a tremor that pierced straight through him. "It's gone," Ethan said. "Completely gone." Relief washed across Lily's face so gently that it nearly shattered him. He knelt and examined her trembling hands again, fighting the guilt that struck him like a blow. "I should be known," he muttered under his breath. "I should be recognized something was wrong." No shook his head firmly. "Most people wouldn't. It looks harmless. And whoever put it there, they wanted it to look harmless." His tone was sharper this time, edged with something that made Ethan pause. No wasn't just knowledgeable, he was cautious to the point of suspicion. It wasn't merely experience, it was trauma. The kind that came from life teaching him that danger often hid behind pretty things. Ethan helped Lily settle into bed while No stepped back to give them space. Once she was comfortable, Ethan gently brushed her hair and kissed her forehead. "You're safe now," he said softly. "Tomorrow we're calling in specialists to check everything. And I'll personally inspect this entire home from top to bottom." Lily nodded sleepily, her eyes already drifting shut. Even in her exhaustion, Ethan noticed something that tightened his throat, the slightest easing of tension in her face. As though simply removing the plant allowed her a breath of relief her body hadn't felt in months. When she finally fell asleep, Ethan stepped out of the room quietly and closed the door. No stood in the hallway, posture straight, eyes sharp. Ethan studied him for a long moment, then motioned him toward the living room. They sat opposite each other on the couch, the city lights painting the room in soft blue shadows. Ethan leaned forward, fingers interlocked. You helped her, more than I expected, more than any doctor has in months. No lowered his gaze slightly but didn't look away. I'm glad, Ethan nodded, but I need you to tell me the truth now. Everything. Who else have you seen affected by this plant? And how did you get involved? No hesitated. I told you about Maya, but she wasn't the only one. I learned about plants like this after I spent time with a few people who work with community gardens and shelters. They taught me what to watch for, especially in old buildings or places where people bring in plants they don't fully understand. Ethan studied him, sensing there was more the boy wasn't saying. How long were you living on the streets? He asked. No stiffened. A while. How long is a while? A few years. Ethan's throat tightened. Where are your parents? No didn't flinch, but his eyes hardened with a wall that rose instantly. Gone. The single word carried layers of pain. Ethan didn't push further. Not yet. Instead, he shifted gears. No, he said carefully, I need to know why you approached us tonight. How did you even know Lily was sick? No swallowed, his fingers tangling with the frayed strap of his backpack. People talk, he said. Your daughter, she's been on the news. And sometimes kids on the street hear things other people don't. Someone mentioned a girl who got sick out of nowhere. Someone else talked about the plants in rich apartments. I remembered the plant from Maya's place. When I saw a picture of Lily on a V, she looked like Maya did, weak, tired, losing strength fast. Ethan felt the pieces clicking together. A homeless child paying attention to medical symptoms, connecting patterns adults missed. Choosing to approach him not for money but for food. It made sense in a tragic, remarkable way. He leaned back, exhaling slowly. You saved her, he said quietly. Whether we know the full story yet or not, you helped my daughter. And for that I owe you more than a meal. No tense, slightly uneasy with the idea of being indebted to a billionaire. Ethan noticed. I'm not talking about charity, he clarified. I want to understand your situation, where you'll go tonight, what you have to go back to. No met his gaze with the same stubborn resilience he'd shown since the moment they met. I'm fine, he said. I've survived this long. Ethan shook his head slowly. Survival isn't the same as living. For the first time, No didn't reply. He looked toward Lily's room, then back to the man in front of him. Something softened in his expression, not trust. Not yet, but the beginning of something that might one day become trust. Ethan stood and gently placed a hand on the back of the couch. Stay here tonight. I have a guest room. It's warm, safe, and better than being out there. He didn't pressure, demand, or bribe. He simply offered. No considered the offer in silence, weighed it the way a street kid had to weigh every decision, with caution, fear, and a survival instinct forged through hardship. Then he nodded once. Okay. Ethan offered a small, genuine nod in return. Good. Tomorrow we figure out the truth. As No followed him toward the guest room, the night outside felt different. Not safer, not yet, but the first step toward uncovering a mystery that went far deeper than a plant. And the first step toward a bond none of them could have predicted. No barely slept that night, even though the guest room Ethan offered him was more comfortable than anywhere he had rested in years. The mattress felt impossibly soft, the sheets smelled like detergent instead of city dust, and the temperature stayed warm instead of shifting wildly the way it did outdoors. Yet comfort didn't erase the habits forged by survival. He woke repeatedly, listening for footsteps, doors, voices, anything that might signal danger. His instincts weren't ready to accept safety as something he deserved. Each time he opened his eyes, he found the ceiling above him glowing faintly from the city lights leaking through the blinds. The unfamiliar stillness made him more aware of how long he had lived without one place to call home. At the same time, the events of the day replayed over and over in his mind. Ethan's anger, Lily's fragile attempts at hope, and that plant, the one he recognized instantly. He thought about Maya, about how terrified she had been before he figured out what was happening. He thought about all the kids he had met during his years on the street. Kids who got sick because of things no one noticed until it was too late. And he thought about this new family, one he had known for barely a few hours, yet somehow cared about more than he expected. Something about Lily's soft voice and Ethan's frantic determination stirred a protective instinct inside him that he couldn't explain. When dawn finally pushed its pale light across the skyline, Noah sat up, rubbed his eyes, and slung his backpack over his shoulder. He wasn't planning to run, not exactly, but he needed the option. People with power could change their minds fast, and he had seen enough adults retreat from promises when the sun came up. So he packed everything he owned: 2 shirts, a pocket knife, some socks, a folded drawing Maya gave him, and the leftover meal from the restaurant. Then he sat on the edge of the bed and waited, unsure what came next. Across the penthouse, Ethan was already awake. He hadn't slept either. He spent the night pacing between the kitchen, Lily's room, and his office, replaying every conversation he'd had with the interior designer responsible for Lily's plants. Something hadn't felt right even back then, but he had dismissed it as the man being overly enthusiastic about improving children's mental wellness through plant aesthetics. Now those memories tasted bitter. He typed message after message to his security team, ordering background checks on every person who had ever stepped foot inside the penthouse. He wanted timelines, invoices, security footage, digital signatures, anything that could lead to answers. When the clock hit 7, he shut his laptop, rubbed the exhaustion from his face, and walked down the hall. Lily was still asleep, curled like a small comma beneath her blankets. Her breathing sounded steadier than it had in weeks. It gave him a flicker of something he hadn't allowed himself to feel in a long time, maybe the faintest outline of hope. He closed her door gently before turning toward the guest room. Noah was sitting upright when Ethan entered. He looked smaller in the large room, like a kid trying to disappear into the edges of a world that didn't belong to him. Ethan leaned against the doorframe for a moment, studying him. "Morning," he said quietly. "Morning," Noah replied, adjusting his backpack strap, ready to leave if he needed to. Ethan nodded toward the living room. "Come on, I made breakfast." Noah hesitated. "You cook?" Ethan gave a faint, tired smile. "These days, only for my daughter. And apparently for unexpected guests who claim they can diagnose toxic plants better than medical professionals." Noah blinked, almost amused, and followed him down the hall. The kitchen smelled like scrambled eggs and buttered toast, simple food but warm and inviting. Noah stared at the plate Ethan set in front of him as though it were part of a test. People rarely cooked for him. Most days he fought for leftovers or bought cheap snacks with whatever coins he earned. Eating a meal that someone made intentionally felt foreign. Ethan sat across from him with a mug of coffee, his posture rigid, his eyes more focused than ever. "After we eat," he said, "I want you to look through the rest of the apartment. I want to know if there are any other plants like the one in Lily's room." Noah nodded. "There probably aren't. That one looked intentional, but I can check." Ethan set his mug down. "Good, because I want answers, and whoever put that plant here had access to my home. That narrows the list, but not enough." Noah swallowed his bite slowly. "Do you think someone wanted to hurt her on purpose?" Ethan's expression tightened. "I don't know, but I intend to find out." His voice carried a cold promise, one that made even Noah's street-hardened instincts stir with caution. After they finished breakfast, Ethan led Noah through the penthouse. The boy examined each room, scanning corners, shelves, and window spaces for anything that resembled memory leaf. He didn't rush. He checked for soil residue, for cuts in planters, for leaf patterns. Ethan watched him closely, impressed despite himself. The boy wasn't guessing, he was analyzing with the methodical focus of someone who had been forced to learn how to protect himself and others. When they reached the final room, a rarely used home office, Noah paused near a tall decorative vase filled with artificial branches. He leaned in, sniffed, then shook his head. "Fake," he muttered. "Expensive, but fake." Ethan let out a breath, so it was only in her room. "Yeah," Noah said, "and I've got a feeling it wasn't random." Ethan's jaw twitched. "I've got the same feeling." They returned to the living room where Ethan pulled up a tablet and opened security footage from the days the interior designer visited. Noah stood behind him, watching over his shoulder. They fast-forwarded through hours of video. Most of it showed workers carrying furniture, adjusting curtains, or setting up light fixtures. But one clip made Noah lean in. A man, late 40s, neatly dressed, entered Lily's room carrying a black case. He waited until the other workers left, then removed a planter from the case and placed it beside her bed. He moved quickly, glancing over his shoulder often. When he finished, he wiped down the surface with a cloth, hid the planter's original packaging in the case, and left. Noah pointed at the screen. "That's it, that's the guy." Ethan's eyes narrowed as recognition hit him like a punch. "His name is Harold Strickland. He wasn't a designer. He was hired as a consultant on the project because he claimed expertise in children's environmental wellness." Ethan remembered now. Harold had been oddly charismatic, overly talkative, eager to impress. He had insisted on adding a natural energy component to Lily's space. At the time it sounded like harmless nonsense. Now it looked like something else entirely. Ethan played the clip again, watching the way Harold moved, the caution, the secrecy. He knew exactly what he was doing. Ethan muttered. "No," nodded. "Yeah." "And he didn't want anyone to know about that plant." Ethan locked the tablet screen and set it aside, his expression darkening. "I'm going to find him," he said. "And when I do, he's going to tell me everything." Noah looked at him, unsure whether Ethan meant a confrontation or something far more serious. With the way Ethan's voice sounded, Noah suspected the latter. Before either could speak again, a weak voice drifted from the hallway. "Dad." Ethan turned instantly. Lily stood in the doorway, gripping the frame for support. Her legs shook, but she was standing, something she hadn't managed without assistance in weeks. Ethan rushed to her, catching her before she could fall. She leaned into him with a tired but steady smile. "I feel lighter," she whispered. Ethan pulled her into his arms, overwhelmed by relief so intense it almost buckled his knees. Over her head, he made eye contact with Noah. The boy didn't smile, but his expression filled with something warm, something rare hope. It was working. Removing the plant was already changing Lily's condition. And now, with proof in front of him, Ethan's resolve hardened into something unstoppable. Someone had tried to destroy his daughter. He wasn't just going to uncover the truth, he was going to dismantle the entire reason behind it. Ethan held Lily for a long moment, feeling the faint but undeniable strength returning to her small body. It wasn't dramatic, not a miracle recovery by any means, but it was real. Her legs trembled less, her breathing steadied faster, and her eyes, once dimmed by constant fatigue, showed a spark of energy he hadn't seen in weeks. It was enough to convince him that the plant had been poisoning her, and removing it had been the first step toward undoing the damage. When he finally guided her back toward her room, Noah watched with a mixture of relief and concern, understanding more than he let on. He knew better than anyone that recovery wasn't instant, and danger rarely vanished completely after the first solution. Once Lily was settled back in bed, Ethan stepped into the hall and closed the door softly. His face had changed. The desperation that haunted him for months had transformed into a cold, focused resolve. He looked like a man with a mission, someone who had found a target, and would not stop until every answer was ripped from the shadows. Noah shifted slightly, clutching the strap of his backpack. "You were going after him, aren't you?" Ethan didn't look surprised at the question. Yes, Harold Strickland knew exactly what he brought into this home. That wasn't ignorance, that was intent. Then why? Noah asked. Why would someone want to hurt her? Ethan exhaled slowly as he walked toward the living room, gesturing for Noah to follow. "I don't know, but I'll find out, and once I do, he'll face consequences he never imagined." Noah didn't say anything. His footsteps were soft behind Ethan as they entered the wide-open room. The massive windows overlooking Manhattan painted the space in morning gold. Ethan crossed the room and picked up his phone from the marble counter. He scrolled through his contacts until he reached the one labeled Gray Blackwell, Private Security Director. Gray wasn't just an employee, he was former military, former intelligence, someone who could find hidden threads in impossible places. If anyone could dig into Harold's life, motives, and connections, Ethan pressed dial. The call connected within 3 rings. "Mr. Walker." Gray's voice was crisp, alert despite the early hour. "I need you at the Penthos," Ethan said now. "Bring your team. We're dealing with a potential threat inside the building." Gray didn't ask questions he knew Ethan wouldn't answer over the phone. "Understood." "Ida, 12 minutes. Make it 8, Ethan said before ending the call, Noah's brow furrowed. "Are they going to arrest him?" Ethan shook his head. "Not yet. First, I need answers. Motive? Everything's." Noah watched him quietly, his eyes reflecting the city skyline. "You think someone wanted her gone," he said. Not a question, a conclusion. Ethan stopped walking. When he turned, his expression carried a depth of fury that startled even himself. "Yes," he said. "And I intend to know who." Before either of them could speak again, the elevator dinged. Gray Blackwell stepped out with 2 members of his security team. Gray was tall, broad-shouldered, with an air of calm strength that came from years of experience in dangerous situations. He scanned the Penthos instantly, noting the tension, the guarded posture of the boy beside Ethan, and the urgency in Ethan's eyes. "Sir," Gray said, stepping forward. "What happened? It didn't waste time. A toxic plant was placed in my daughter's room. Intentionally, it made her sick, very sick. The person who installed it was Harold Strickland." Gray's jaw tightened. "I remember him. External contractor. We ran a basic background check at the time. Nothing significant came up." "Run another one," Ethan said sharply. "A full sweep. And I want him found before the end of the day." Gray nodded. "What about your daughter? Is she all right?" "Better than yesterday," Ethan said, "because we removed the plant. But whoever put it there didn't want her to be." Gray glanced at No. "This him?" Ethan nodded. He identified the plant, saved her. Gray looked impressed. "Good work, kid." No shrugged, uncomfortable with praise. "I just knew what it was. And that made all the difference," Ethan said. "Now we find out who wanted it there." Gray turned to his team. "Sweep the building. Check maintenance entries, delivery logs, security footage. I want every person who entered this penthouse in the last 6 months on my desk within the hour. His men nodded and split up, disappearing into different sections of the home. Gray looked back at Ethan. We'll find him. But if this was deliberate, he wasn't acting alone. Ethan's eyes narrowed. I know. No, fidgeted. If someone wants to hurt her, then you need to be careful too. The warning carried weight. Street kids learned to sense danger long before adults did. Ethan regarded him for a moment before placing a firm hand on his shoulder. I'm not leaving my daughter unprotected, not for a second. Gray cleared his throat. There's something else, he said. Something you need to consider. Ethan lifted an eyebrow. What? Someone with Harold's background wouldn't have done something like this for money alone. He got access too easily. Too directly. This feels like someone with personal motivation and influence. The implication hung heavy in the air. Someone close, someone with history, someone who wanted revenge. No glanced between them, reading their expressions. Do you know anyone who'd want to hurt your family? Ethan's jaw tightened, and for a moment he looked away to the hallway where Lily slept. Yes, he said, one person. No, waited. Gray waited. Ethan's voice dropped into something raw. The kind of tone a man used only when speaking of someone who had caused wounds that never healed. My ex-wife. The room stilled, the city humming beyond the glass like a distant warning. No's eyes widened slightly. Lily's mom. Ethan nodded slowly. Veronica Hayes. Gray crossed his arms, deep in thought. We know she has a temper, but this Ethan cut in. She despises me, not quietly, not subtly, with a bitterness that's been building for years. No frowned. Enough to hurt her own daughter. Ethan froze. The question struck something deep, something he didn't want to acknowledge. Gray spoke before Ethan could. People with that level of resentment, they don't think the way we do. Sometimes they aim to destroy the person they blame, no matter who gets caught in the crossfire. Ethan exhaled slowly, his world narrowing to a single terrifying possibility. Veronica, the woman he once loved, the mother of his child, might have orchestrated this. Might have wanted Lily gone, not out of cruelty toward the girl, but as a weapon against him. No watched Ethan's face shift between anger, confusion, and something deeper, betrayal. What are you going to do? No asked. Ethan straightened, shoulders squared in a posture that belongs to a man ready to wage war. I'm going to confront her, he said, today. Gray hesitated. Sir, I recommend caution. If she's involved, she won't admit it easily. And Harold may not be the only one she used. Ethan's eyes hardened. I'm done being cautious. He grabbed his coat from a nearby chair. She wanted to hurt my daughter. That ends now. No stepped forward. I'm coming with you. Ethan looked surprised. Why? Because have you seen what this kind of thing does to people? No said. And because Lily needs truth more than anything. Ethan considered the boy, this kid who had walked into his world just last night and already changed everything. He nodded. All right. But stay close. Gray gestured toward the elevator. I'll have a car ready. As the three of them moved toward the doors, Ethan felt something he hadn't felt in months. Not fear, not desperation, but purpose. He would uncover the truth no matter how deep the betrayal ran. And he would protect Lily with everything he had left. The elevator doors slid closed, sealing their determination inside. What waited beyond them was uncertain. But one thing was clear, this was no longer a mystery, it was a battle, and Ethan Walker was done losing. The car that Gray arranged waited at the curb with its engine humming steadily, a black SUV built for both comfort and protection. Ethan stepped in first, his jaw clenched, his mind running through every memory he had of Veronica Hayes. Their marriage had unraveled years ago, but the bitterness she carried with her after the divorce had only sharpened over time. He remembered the arguments, the threats masked as emotional pleas, the accusations that he had ruined her life. He remembered her walking out of the courtroom with a glare that promised payback someday. Back then, he thought her anger was nothing more than resentment toward their failed relationship. He had never imagined she might direct that rage toward their daughter. No entered the SUV beside him, buckling his seatbelt with stiff, cautious movements. His backpack stayed pressed against his chest like armor. Gray sat in the front passenger seat, already on the phone with one of his operatives, gathering everything possible about Harold Strickland's connections. The driver merged into Manhattan's morning traffic, weaving past taxis, buses, and commuters on their way to work. The city buzzed with its usual frenzied rhythm, unaware that somewhere inside one of its polished high-rise condos, a man was preparing to confront a truth that could destroy him. Ethan stared out the window but wasn't seeing the passing buildings. His thoughts spun around Lily, her smile, her courage, the way she tried so hard to stay strong for him. The idea that someone might have intentionally hurt her filled him with a fiercely protective rage, the kind that eclipsed reason. The ex-wife he once tried to understand had now become the main suspect in a crime that cut deeper than anything he had ever experienced. Noah glanced at Ethan occasionally, aware of the storm brewing inside him. He didn't know Veronica, but he knew anger. He knew what it looked like when it transformed someone into a version of themselves they didn't recognize. And the possibility that a mother could harm her own daughter disturbed him in ways he couldn't articulate. Kids on the street were often hurt by the people meant to protect them. But this felt different. It felt deliberate. They arrived at Veronica's building, a tall, glassy structure in Tribeca with sharp angles and a pristine lobby. Ethan stepped out of the SUV, his posture rigid, his eyes fixed on the entrance. Gray followed close behind, always scanning, always evaluating. No trailed them with careful steps, his gaze flicking between the luxury around him and the people passing by. He had grown up surrounded by danger, not marble floors and uniformed concierge staff. Yet his instincts told him that danger might be hiding in places that looked expensive and polished. The concierge recognized Ethan immediately. "Mr. Walker, good morning. Miss Hayes is home. Shall I announce you?" Ethan's voice came out cold and clipped. "No, we'll go up." The concierge nodded, pressing a button to grant elevator access to Veronica's floor. As the elevator climbed, Ethan felt the tension coiling tighter around his chest. No stood beside him, silent but attentive. Gray stood near the doors, prepared for anything. When the elevator arrived with a soft chime, Ethan stepped into the hallway where Veronica's apartment sat behind a glossy white door. He didn't hesitate. He knocked once firmly. When there was no immediate answer, he knocked again, louder. After a moment, locks clicked and the door opened. Veronica Hayes stood before them, her blonde hair pulled into a sleek ponytail, her makeup flawless despite the early hour. She wore a silk robe and held a cup of herbal tea. Her eyes widened slightly when she saw Ethan, but not in fear. More like annoyance. "Ethan," she said coolly. "To what do I owe this unexpected visit?" Ethan didn't waste time. "We need to talk now." Veronica raised an eyebrow, then stepped aside to let them in. The apartment was spacious and meticulously arranged, every piece of furniture positioned for aesthetic appeal rather than comfort. No hung near the doorway, unsure whether he belonged in a place like this. Veronica's gaze flicked toward him and Gray, and her expression tightened. "You brought company. These are the people who discovered what someone put in Lily's room," Ethan said, "a toxic plant, one that made her sick for months." Veronica froze for a fraction of a second, barely noticeable, but no caught it. Street kids became experts at reading micro-expressions, those fleeting reactions people tried to hide. Veronica recovered quickly, lifting her chin. "I don't know what you were talking about," she said. "A plant made her sick. That sounds ridiculous." Ethan stepped closer, his voice low but controlled. "The plant was called Memory Leaf. It wasn't decorative, it was toxic. And someone installed it in her room without permission." Veronica's face remained composed, but her grip tightened slightly on her cup. "Are you accusing me of something?" Ethan met her eyes with a stare that cut through every mask she tried to wear. "I'm asking why Harold Strickland was in Lily's room the day the plant was placed there." Veronica blinked. "Who?" "Don't lie to me," Ethan snapped. His voice echoed in the polished apartment. Veronica's jaw flexed. "That consultant. He was part of the project team. You approved him." "He brought the plant," Ethan said, "and he didn't do it on accident." Silence stretched across the room like a wire pulled tight. No watched Veronica carefully. That tiny flicker of reaction earlier, it hadn't been confusion. It had been recognition, and something close to fear. Veronica set her cup down on the marble counter. "Ethan, I think you letting your paranoia run wild. You always did jump to conclusions." Gray stepped forward slightly, but Ethan raised a hand to stop him. "This isn't paranoia. Someone tried to kill our daughter." Veronica's eyes widened with genuine shock, or something pretending to be genuine.
"Kill Lily? That's insane."
But her reaction wasn't fitting together cleanly. No sensed it. Something in her tone didn't align with her expression, and her hands trembled slightly, not in surprise but in calculation. Ethan's voice grew darker. "Harold placed the plant, and he didn't do it without direction." Veronica crossed her arms. "Are you actually accusing me of directing someone to harm my own child? Do you hear how deranged that sounds?" No stepped forward suddenly, his voice steady. "You knew about the plant." Veronica whipped her head toward him. "Excuse me." "You knew?" No repeated. Your face changed when he said the name Harold, not confused, not shocked. You recognized it. Veronica's nostrils flared. "Who is this child?" Ethan didn't take his eyes off her. "The one who saved Lily." Veronica scoffed, but her mask was cracking. No continued, unblinking. "You didn't expect anyone to figure it out this fast." Ethan stepped closer to Veronica, closing the distance between them. "If you re-involved, I will find proof. Every message, every call, every transaction. And when I do, you'll answer for it." Veronica's eyes burned with a fierce, defensive rage. "You always thought I was the villain," she hissed. "You always made me out to be unstable. You ruined my reputation, destroyed my relationships, took everything, and now you were trying to pin this on me." "If you didn't do it," Ethan said coldly, "why does your reaction look exactly like guilt?" Veronica's voice rose.
Because you cornering me!
Because you reaccusing me of something monstrous. No watched her closely, her breathing quickened, her hands clenched. Her voice shook not with innocence but with fear of exposure. Gray's phone buzzed, he checked the screen, then walked to Ethan and whispered, "Sir, we found something." Ethan turned slightly. "What?" Gray's eyes darkened. "Financial records. Harold received multiple payments from an anonymous account, one traced back to someone using Veronica Hayes' name as a front." The room seemed to tilt. Veronica's face drained of color. No breathed in sharply. And Ethan for a moment forgot how to breathe at all. "Veronica," he whispered, "you paid him." Veronica opened her mouth, then closed it. Tears gathered at the corners of her eyes, but not the kind born from grief. The kind born from unraveling control. "Ethan," she whispered, "you destroyed me. I wanted you to feel the same pain." No felt his stomach drop. Ethan stepped back, staring at the woman who gave birth to his daughter and tried to destroy her anyway. "You were never meant to lose her," Veronica whispered through shaking breaths. "Just to suffer." But the damage was done. Ethan looked at her with a hollow mix of rage and disbelief. "You tried to hurt Lily to get to me," he said. "That makes you a danger to her, and I will never let you near her again." Veronica's voice cracked. "Ethan, please, enough," he said. "Gray, call the authorities." And as Gray stepped aside to make the call, Veronica realized she hadn't just lost the upper hand, she had lost every piece of Ethan she once knew. Every ounce of trust, every right to be part of her daughter's life. For the first time she looked truly afraid. The moment Gray stepped toward the balcony to make the call, Veronica's composure shattered. "Ethan, wait please," she pleaded, reaching toward him as though her touch alone might undo the truth hanging heavily in the air. But Ethan took a step back, his expression carved from stone. He had endured years of her bitterness, her sharp words, her attempts to wound him emotionally. But this using their daughter as a weapon crossed a line he didn't know forgiveness could reach. Veronica's face contorted with something between desperation and fury as she looked between Ethan, no, and Gray. Her breathing grew quick, uneven. "You don't understand what you did to me," she said, voice shaking. "You humiliated me. You cut me out of everything. You made me feel like nothing." Ethan's jaw clenched. "I fought for custody because you were unstable and reckless. I didn't cut you out of Lily's life. You walked away." Veronica's eyes glistened with tears, but her expression remained hard. "Because every time I saw you together, every time she chose you over me, it reminded me of how much I lost. Every part of it was your fault. Your perfect image, your perfect money, your perfect life. You never let me forget where I fell short." "This isn't about who fell short," Ethan said, voice sharp. "This is about a 10-year-old girl who almost died because of you." No watched, his stomach twisting. He had seen many parents fail their kids, but never like this, never with intent. Veronica backed away slowly, her hands trembling. "I didn't mean for her to die," she said. "I only wanted you to suffer the way I suffered when you took everything from me." Ethan's glare darkened. "You targeted the one person I love most. You knew I'd do anything for her. You knew it and you used it." Veronica's voice splintered. "You took my reputation, my career. I had nothing left. Nothing but anger and the hope that one day you'd feel the way I did." No stepped forward slightly, unable to remain completely silent. "But you aimed at the wrong person," he said. "Lily didn't hurt you, he did." Veronica snapped her head toward him. "Stay out of this," she hissed. "You know nothing about our lives." No didn't back away. His eyes were steady. "Maybe not. But I know what it feels like when adults blame the wrong person for their pain. I know what it feels like when kids get caught in the middle." Veronica's lips parted, something akin to guilt flashing in her gaze. But guilt was too late and too weak to undo what she set in motion. At that moment, Gray returned. "Police are on their way," he said, 10 minutes out. Veronica's shoulders tensed. Her gaze darted around the apartment as though searching for an exit, a loophole. Anything that might save her from the consequences she had brought on herself. "You can't do this to me," she whispered. "Lily's mother. A mother protects her child," Ethan said softly. "You used her." Veronica shook her head wildly. "I didn't know it would get so bad. Harold told me the plant would only make her weak. He said it would cause stress, fatigue, nothing dangerous. He said you'd panic. He told me you'd crumble under pressure." Ethan stared at her, horrified. "You escalated something you didn't even understand." Veronica's voice cracked. "I thought you'd suffer. I thought she'd get better once you broke." "I didn't think that's the problem," Ethan said. "You didn't think at all." Silence hovered like a heavy fog. No shifted uncomfortably, overwhelmed by the rawness of the moment, but unable to look away. He had never seen a man fall apart so quietly as Ethan did right then, not with tears or shouting, but with the hollow devastation of a father realizing the person he once loved had betrayed the deepest part of him. Veronica reached for Ethan again, but he stepped away as though her touch might burn. "Don't come near me," he said. "And don't ever come near Lily again." The words landed with the weight of a door slamming shut forever. Veronica stumbled back, her breath catching in her throat. "Ethan, please don't do this. You already did," he said. No watched her facade crumble entirely. Her shoulders sagged, her voice dropped to a hoarse whisper. "I never wanted to lose her." Ethan cut her off. "You already have." Gray approached. "Authorities want her waiting inside until they arrive. I'll stay here with her. You should take No and head back to your daughter." Ethan nodded stiffly. Veronica's eyes widened. "You're leaving? Just like that?" "There's nothing left to say," Ethan replied. Veronica's knees weakened, and she sank onto a chair, trembling. For the first time, she looked small, fragile in a way that had nothing to do with sympathy and everything to do with consequences finally catching up. As Ethan turned away, No looked at her one last time. She wasn't a monster carved from darkness. She was someone who allowed her bitterness to mutate into something dangerous. But Noah had learned long ago that hurt people didn't always break alone, they sometimes broke others with them. Veronica had done exactly that. He followed Ethan out of the apartment and into the elevator. The doors slid shut, cutting off the sight of Veronica hugging her arms tightly to her chest. Ethan stood still, his eyes fixed on the elevator doors as though trying to hold himself together. When he finally spoke, his voice was thick but contained. "Thank you," he said quietly. No blinked. "For what?" "For seeing what I couldn't," Ethan said, "for helping her. For being there when everything started to fall apart." No stared at the floor, unsure how to respond. Compliments weren't something he trusted. "I just didn't want her to get hurt anymore." Ethan looked at him with something deep, something bordering on gratitude that couldn't be fully expressed with words. "I owe you more than you know," he said. The elevator doors opened, and they stepped back into the lobby. The city greeted them with sharp morning light, traffic noise, and the pulse of life moving forward. Yet something in Ethan had shifted completely. And something in No, to a sense that he was no longer just an outsider passing through someone else's tragedy. They climbed into the SUV again, both quieter this time, not from tension but from the heavy aftermath of confrontation. "What happens now?" No finally asked. Ethan leaned back in the seat. "Exhaling now," he said, "I go home, I make sure Lily is safe. And I build a world where she never has to fear anything like this again." No swallowed, and Veronica. Ethan's expression hardened with a resolve that could break stone. "She'll face justice," he said, "whatever that looks like." The SUV merged into traffic, swallowing them into the flow of the city. Neither spoke for several minutes. No clutched his backpack, thinking about the girl he barely knew yet cared deeply about. Ethan stared out the window, thinking about the daughter he almost lost and the betrayal he couldn't yet process. But beneath all the pain and uncertainty, one thing remained absolute: they were going home. And they were going there together. When Ethan and No returned to the penthouse, the air inside felt different, charged with a tension that hadn't been there before, as if the walls themselves sensed the turmoil from the confrontation with Veronica. Ethan paused just inside the door, steadying himself before he walked farther in. Everything he had heard replayed in his mind like an unwanted echo: Veronica's confession, her justifications, her twisted reasoning. He wasn't sure which part cut deeper, the betrayal itself or the fact that she believed her pain somehow excused endangering their daughter. Noah stood a few steps behind him, gripping his backpack strap, unsure whether to walk forward or wait for permission. He had never been inside a home that felt so luxurious yet so heavy at the same time. The space was peaceful, quiet, immaculate, and yet thick with the emotional weight of the storm Ethan had just endured. After a long moment, Ethan finally spoke. "Let's check on her." His voice was rough, but steady enough to guide them both down the hallway. When he opened Lily's door, the soft glow of morning sunlight filtered across her bed. Lily was awake, sitting up against the pillows, reading a book with trembling hands that were noticeably steadier than they had been the day before. The moment she saw them, her face lit up with a brightness that dissolved some of the shadows clinging to Ethan. "Dad," she said, and her smile was a burst of hope that washed away the exhaustion etched across his features. He crossed the room quickly, kneeling beside her bed and brushing a gentle hand across her cheek. "How do you feel?" he asked. "Better," she whispered. "I don't feel as heavy as before, and my legs, they don't hurt as much." Ethan let out a shaky breath he didn't realize he'd been holding. "That's good," he said softly. "That's really good." No lingered in the doorway, watching the scene with a mixture of warmth and distance, knowing he didn't quite belong but unable to pull himself away. Lily looked in his direction. "Hi, No." Her voice was soft but warm. "Hi," he replied, stepping into the room. "You look stronger today." "I feel stronger," she said. "Did you guys find out what happened?" Ethan froze for a moment. He didn't want to burden her with the darkest pieces, not now, not when she was healing. But she deserved honesty. "We found out who brought the plant," he said carefully. Lily's expression shifted, concern blooming across her features. Is it someone who works here? No, Ethan said. Someone we used to trust. Lily studied his face for a long moment. She was young, but she understood more than he wished she did. Mom, she whispered. Ethan's heart twisted. He had never wanted her to experience this truth, the knowledge that her own mother carried a bitterness sharp enough to hurt her. He brushed her hair back. We were going to protect you, he said gently. That's what matters now. Lily swallowed, her eyes watering slightly, but she nodded. She trusted him fully, completely, and that trust strengthened Ethan's resolve. No stepped closer to the bed. You don't have to worry anymore, he told her. It's gone, and your room is safe now. Lily looked at him with a quiet gratitude that made him straighten slightly, as though standing guard. Ethan watched the exchange, and something inside him softened. No wasn't just a kid who stumbled into their lives. He had become part of something larger, something that connected them all in ways Ethan didn't yet understand. After Lily finished her breakfast and drifted into a light nap, Ethan and No stepped out of the room. Ethan closed the door gently, leaning his forehead against the frame for a moment. When he looked up, his eyes were red not from tears, but from the exhaustion of carrying too much for too long. No spoke quietly. She'll get better, Ethan nodded. She already is because of you. No shifted uncomfortably. Compliments still felt like a trap, a doorway to expectations he wasn't ready for. Ethan noticed. Instead of pressing, he gestured toward the kitchen. Come on, you should eat again. They sat at the island counter. Ethan prepared something simple: toast, fruit, and cereal for No, because overwhelming the boy with luxury felt wrong. No ate carefully, still unused to meals that were guaranteed, meals he didn't have to fight for or earn. Ethan watched him, noting the guarded way the boy held himself. You don't have to be on alert here, Ethan said quietly. You're safe. No kept eating without looking up. Safe doesn't usually last. Ethan's gaze softened. It will this time. No didn't argue, but he didn't believe it either. Not yet. Moments later, Gray returned from the hallway after escorting officers who had taken Veronica into custody. He approached Ethan with a quiet, professional nod. She's been taken in, Gray said. They'll process her and begin questioning. Ethan inhaled slowly. Good, there's something else, Gray said, lowering his voice. The authorities found records, messages between her and Harold. It was more planned than we thought. Ethan's jaw clenched. How much more? Enough that she expected you to spiral under pressure, Gray replied. She wanted to cause emotional damage, not physical, but negligence at this level. She'll be facing serious charges. Ethan nodded grimly. He didn't take pleasure in it. Veronica was still Lily's mother. But he would never allow her close enough to cause harm again. When Gray stepped back to make another call, Ethan looked over at No. The boy met his eyes with a steady seriousness that belonged to someone far older than his years. You don't have to stay, Ethan said gently. If you want to leave, I won't stop you. No looked down at his hands, gripping his backpack strap again. Do you want me to leave? Ethan shook his head. No. I want you to stay, but I'm not going to force you. That's not how trust works. No swallowed, conflicted. He wasn't used to choices, real choices that weren't about survival. But he looked toward Lily's door, then back at Ethan. She'll need help, he whispered. And someone needs to watch out for her. Ethan felt something shift, a bond forming, not by blood but by something stronger. Then stay, Ethan said softly. Help me protect her. Help me help her heal. No gave a small, determined nod. Ethan stood, placing a steady hand on the boy's shoulder. I meant what I said, he continued. You're safe here for as long as you choose to be. No looked around the penthos again, still unsure. Still carrying the weight of the street inside him, but for the first time since entering this world. He allowed himself to believe that maybe he didn't have to face things alone anymore. Ethan turned toward the window, gazing out at the sprawling city below. This isn't over, he said quietly. But now we start repairing what she broke. And somewhere behind him, No tightened his grip on his backpack, feeling something he hadn't felt in years, maybe not ever. A place to belong, a reason to stay. And a promise he intended to keep as long as Lily needed him. He wouldn't let anything or anyone hurt her again. Ethan stayed near the window long after Gray left, watching the city pulse beneath him in rhythms he had once mastered. New York had always been predictable in its chaos, trains rumbling underground, traffic honking through avenues, people rushing with coffee and deadlines. But his life no longer followed any pattern he recognized. Everything he thought he knew about control and stability had been severed in a single night, revealing a fragile truth that left him feeling exposed in ways he had never imagined. Only when he heard the soft shuffle of footsteps behind him did he turn. No stood in the doorway, still holding his backpack even though he no longer seemed ready to flee. The boy's presence grounded something in Ethan, a reminder that despite the betrayal, despite the emotional wreckage, there were still people worth fighting for, still small pieces of good that had entered his life when he least expected them. You should rest, Ethan said, though he himself felt far from capable of resting. No shook his head. I'm fine. I just wanted to make sure you're okay. Ethan let out an exhale that resembled a faint laugh, tired, brittle, but grateful. I'm not sure what I am, he admitted, but I'm here, and that's what matters right now. No stepped into the room and joined him at the window, looking out at the skyline as if seeking answers in the city lights. What happens next, he asked. Ethan glanced at him. Next we focus on Lily, on helping her heal, and Veronica, No asked quietly. Ethan's expression tightened. She'll face the consequences of what she did. I won't let her near Lily again. Not until I'm sure she'll never be a threat. No nodded, though a part of him still struggled to understand how a mother could hurt her own child, even unintentionally. For kids like him, adults were unpredictable forces, sometimes kind, often cruel, but parents were supposed to be different. The fact that they weren't left him uneasy. Before Ethan could say more, a gentle voice drifted down the hall. Dad, Lily called. Ethan turned immediately and began walking toward her room. No followed, but kept a respectful distance behind him. Lily was sitting up again, the sunlight painting soft lines across her face. She looked tired but stronger, noticeably more alert than she had been since the illness began its slow attack on her body. When she saw her father, her expression softened. I didn't want to sleep anymore. I felt lonely. Ethan's chest tightened. He sat beside her, careful not to disturb her blankets. You're not alone, he said gently. I'm right here. Lily glanced past him toward No, hovering in the doorway. And he's here too, she said with a shy smile. No stepped inside the room, trying not to seem out of place. Yeah, he said, I'm here. Lily held out her hand. Come sit with us. No approached slowly, her trust disarming him in ways he didn't understand. He sat in the chair beside the bed. Lily studied him for a moment. Dad said you helped find out what was hurting me, she said. Thank you, you don't have to, No replied, his voice low. I just didn't want to see you get worse. Lily nodded, absorbing his words with a seriousness beyond her age. It was scary, she admitted, not knowing why my legs felt heavy, not knowing why I couldn't walk. Sometimes I felt like something was taking pieces of me away. Ethan closed his eyes briefly, hating that she had suffered silently under his roof. None of that is your fault, he whispered, none of it. Lily reached for his hand. Her small fingers curled around his with a faint but growing strength. Will it get better now, she asked. Ethan leaned in, brushing his thumb across the back of her hand. You're already getting better, step by step, day by day. We'll bring in doctors, professionals who can help your body recover. No added softly, removing the plant was the first step. Your body needs time, but you're healing. Lily smiled at him, small, tired, but real. The kind of smile that told No he hadn't just saved a life, he had changed it. As Lily rested, Ethan guided No back into the living room. She trusts you, Ethan said quietly. No shrugged. Kids see things adults don't. Ethan paused. What do you think she sees? No looked down at his backpack. Someone who won't lie to her. The honesty of the answer struck Ethan. You're good for her, Ethan said. She needs people around her who care. No shifted uncomfortably. I'm not good at caring, he muttered. Doesn't matter, Ethan replied. You're trying. That's worth more than you know. Gray reappeared briefly to update Ethan on Veronica's detainment and Harold's expected arrest. But Ethan waved him off with instructions to handle everything without involving Lily. He didn't want her burdened with legal jargon or emotional cows. He wanted her to heal in peace. When they were alone again, Ethan invited No to sit on the couch. I have a question, he said. About you. No stiffened. Am I in trouble? No, Ethan assured him. Not at all, I just want to understand you better. No looked uneasy but nodded slowly. Ethan studied him carefully, this boy who appeared out of nowhere, who carried himself with the instincts of someone who had spent years dodging danger, who stepped into a stranger's world not because he wanted anything but because he recognized pain and didn't want another child to suffer the way he once had. You said you've been alone a long time, Ethan said gently, and I want to know where you go when you're not here. No looked toward the floor. Different places, he said. Shelters sometimes alleys, sometimes rooftops if I can get high enough. Ethan felt something inside him recoil at the thought of a child navigating the city's cold corners alone. Is there anyone out there who looks out for you? No hesitated. There were kids, a few. We looked after each other. But people move around a lot. Some get taken in. Some disappear. Some he didn't finish. He didn't need to. Ethan understood well enough. You don't have to go back to that, Ethan said firmly. Not anymore. No's eyes flicked up in uncertainty. Why would you care? Ethan leaned forward. Because you saved her. Because you showed courage most adults don't. And because no kid deserves to be out there alone. No swallowed, the words settling inside him in a place he had long protected. What if I mess things up? He whispered. What if I become a problem, then we deal with it, Ethan said. Together, No's throat tightened. Nobody had ever spoken to him that way, not with patience, not with acceptance, not with sincerity. Ethan continued, I want to help you, but only if you want that too. No looked toward Lily's door again. She needs someone to look out for her, he said. I can do that. Ethan nodded slowly. You can do more than that, he said. You can stay, you can have a place here. No's breath hitched. He didn't know how to respond, because nobody had ever offered him something so permanent before. Not safety, not belonging, not a family. Before either could speak again, Lily called faintly from down the hall, Dad. Ethan stood instantly. I'm coming. He turned back to No. We'll talk more later. No nodded, watching him disappear down the hallway. And as he sat alone in the large, quiet penthos, he realized something profound. He wanted to stay. Not because he felt obligated. Not because he had nowhere else to go. But because for the first time in his life, someone wanted him there. Lily needed him. Ethan believed in him, and maybe, just maybe, a life he never thought possible was beginning to form around him, piece by delicate piece. The following days moved slowly but steadily, each sunrise bringing small hints that Lily was recovering. Her arms shook less when she held her cup. Her voice carried a touch more brightness when she spoke. Her eyes lingered on the window longer, observing the world outside with a curiosity that had dimmed during her worst weeks. Every improvement, no matter how minor, breathed life back into the penthos. Ethan stayed close to her, always within reach. He monitored every meal, every stretch, every breath with a tenderness that bordered on fragile vigilance. He was determined not to miss a single sign, good or bad, ever again. No remained nearby too, hovering at a respectful distance unless Lily asked him to join her, which she did more often as the days passed. He brought her books, drew small doodles on her notepad to make her laugh, and told her stories about street cats he had met in alleyways. Lily listened with fascination, her imagination painting vivid worlds around his words. And each time she laughed, Noah felt something growing inside him, something he didn't have a name for but recognized as warmth. Despite the softness returning to their lives, shadows still lurked in the corners. Veronica's arrest echoed through the city's rumor networks. News outlets reported the scandal with salacious headlines, each article escalating the drama. Ethan ignored them all. He didn't want the world's opinions mixing with the fragile healing happening inside his home. He made a promise to himself nothing would disrupt Lily's recovery again. One afternoon, while Gray updated Ethan on legal developments, No sat beside Lily's bed, folding paper cranes from sheets torn from an old notebook he had found in the guest room. Lily watched him closely. Where did you learn to make those? She asked, admiring the neat folds. A girl at a shelter taught me, No said. We used to make them and hang them near the windows. She said they brought good fortune. Lily reached for one of the cranes, running her fingers gently along the wings. They were beautiful. You can keep them, No said. I'll make more. She smiled. Will you teach me how? No nodded, of course. We can start with the easy folds first. Lily lifted herself slightly to sit straighter, determined despite her weak muscles. No guided her slowly through the steps. Crease, fold, lift the corner, turn it over. Her hands trembled, her fingers struggled to obey, but she refused to quit. After several attempts, she held up a crook but recognizable crane. Look, she said proudly. No grinned. You did it. Ethan watched from the doorway, unseen by the kids, his heart tight with gratitude. His daughter was fighting, and Noah was helping her fight. That evening after Lily fell asleep, Ethan joined Noah in the living room. The boy sat on the floor sorting through a pile of papers he had found in his backpack, scraps of sketches, notes from shelters. A faded map of Manhattan with safe spots marked in pen. Ethan sat across from him. You've been helping her stay positive, Ethan said. I can't thank you enough. No shrugged, brushing off the compliment. She's easy to help, she's kind. You re good for her, Ethan repeated. You give her courage. No looked down, his fingers curling around one of his drawings, a cat perched on a fire escape. I'm not used to being good for things, he muttered quietly. Ethan's expression softened. No kid should feel that way. No didn't respond, but the silence that followed felt heavier than most conversations. After a long moment, Ethan asked, Can I ask you something personal? No tensed but nodded. Where is your family? No's eyes flickered with a guarded sheen. Gone, he said. My mom died when I was young. My dad left before that. I stayed with my aunt for a while, but she got sick and couldn't keep me. Ethan's chest tightened. So you ended up on the streets? Yeah. No whispered. It wasn't a choice. It just happened. Ethan shook his head slowly. You deserved more than that. A lot of kids deserve more, No said. But we don't always get it. Ethan felt a wave of admiration for the boy's resilience and a wave of guilt for how insulated his own life had been from realities like No's. Yet somehow, despite everything, No had become one of the strongest people he had ever met. You're safe here, Ethan said again, repeating the promise until it no longer felt like an obligation, but a truth. And you're not going back to the streets. No's throat tightened. Are you sure? Yes, Ethan said firmly. I want you here. Lily wants you here. You're a part of this now. The surprise flickered across Noah's face, quickly followed by something almost like relief, a quiet release of breath he didn't realize he had been holding. Over the next few days, Lily's physical therapy sessions began. A specialist came to the penthos to guide her through stretches and exercises designed to awaken weakened muscles. Noah watched each session intently, learning the movements alongside her. Sometimes he sat behind her, holding her arms steady as she lifted small weights. Other times he counted her steps while she practiced walking with support. Every stumble made Ethan flinch, but Noah remained calm, encouraging her with steady confidence. You're doing amazing, he'd say. Just one more, you've got this. Lily always responded to his encouragement, pushing herself harder each time. Ethan noticed. He noticed the trust she had in Noah, the way her eyes lit up when the boy entered the room, the courage she found simply because he believed she could succeed. Noah had become a lifeline in ways Ethan had never expected. One afternoon, after Lily completed a particularly difficult set, she collapsed back into her wheelchair with a triumphant laugh. I did it, she said. I walked 4 steps. Noah high-fived her gently. You're unstoppable. Ethan joined them, kneeling with a smile he hadn't felt on his face in months. You're my hero, he told her. Lily blushed. I feel like I'm getting pieces of me back. Her words made Noah look down, reflecting on his own missing pieces taken by the streets, by loss, by loneliness. Ethan saw it. He placed a hand on the boy's shoulder. You helped bring those pieces back, he said. The boy's eyes flickered, the weight of the compliment lingering deeper than he let on. That night, as Lily slept peacefully, Ethan sat with Noah in the quiet glow of the city lights. You know, Ethan said thoughtfully, helping her heal is just the beginning. Noah looked at him. What do you mean? Ethan leaned back on the couch, his gaze distant but shifting toward something hopeful. I want to create a place where kids like you don't have to survive alone, a center, clinic, a safe space. Something in Lily's honor and maybe in yours too. Noah felt something warm spread through him, unfamiliar but comforting. Why me? He asked. Ethan smiled softly. 'Cause you taught me something important, that sometimes the people who save us aren't the ones we expect. And because you deserve a future that isn't built from running. Noah didn't answer, but he didn't need to. His expression said everything. For the first time in a long time, the path ahead didn't feel dark or lonely, it felt possible. Days turned into weeks, and each passing sunrise carried Lily a little farther from the darkness she had been trapped in. The physical therapist pushed her harder, helping her rebuild strength in her legs and core, and although the sessions were exhausting, Lily met every challenge with a determination that made Noah quietly proud. What surprised Ethan most was how much Lily leaned on Noah, not because she had to, but because she wanted to. Whenever she faltered or grew frustrated, Noah's voice steadied her, offering encouragement that always seemed to land exactly where her courage was slipping. As Lily improved, the penthos shifted from a place of fear to a sanctuary of rebuilding. Color returned to her cheeks. She found joy in small things again, like the taste of warm soup, the feel of sun on her face from the balcony, or the silly stories Noah shared about the alley cats he once fed behind a bakery downtown. Each laugh, each regained step, felt like reclaiming a stolen piece of childhood. Ethan watched it unfold with a mixture of relief and wonder. For the first time in months, his daughter was healing instead of declining. Yet beneath the relief, another feeling grew stronger: gratitude. Not the surface-level kind he offered out of politeness, but a deeply rooted one that came from realizing a child he barely knew had walked into his life and changed its course entirely. One morning, Ethan invited a well-known neurologist to evaluate Lily's progress. The doctor listened to Lily's lungs, tested her reflexes, asked her to push against his hands with her legs. The improvement was undeniable. She's recovering well, he said, turning to Ethan. Her nervous system is reacting. Her strength is returning. She's still weak, but the change is significant. Lily beamed. Noah, leaning against the doorframe, allowed himself a small smile. Ethan exhaled, relief loosening the tension that had become a permanent fixture in his shoulders. Thank you, Lily said to the doctor. You're the one doing the work, he replied warmly. Keep going, kiddo. That afternoon, after the doctor left, Lily insisted on practicing her walking again. She gripped the parallel bars in her room and took slow, shaky steps. Ethan steadied her from one side while the therapist adjusted her posture from the other. Noah stood at the end of the bars, cheering her on. 3 more, Noah said. You've got this. I'm trying, Lily panted, but even her fatigue carried determination. You're doing more than trying, Noah encouraged. You're doing it. She made it 3 steps, then a 4th before her legs buckled. Ethan caught her instantly, lowering her gently into the wheelchair. She leaned against him, breathing hard but smiling widely. 4 steps, she said proudly. 4. Noah grinned at her. That's more than yesterday. Ethan kissed the top of her head. And tomorrow will be even more. Though the progress thrilled them all, one truth hung quietly in the background: healing wasn't just physical. Lily's mind had scars too. She no longer asked about her mother directly, but Ethan noticed the shadow in her eyes whenever someone mentioned the past. Sometimes he caught her glancing at the door as if expecting Veronica to walk in. Other times he heard her breathing shift when the therapist mentioned parental support. She didn't cry or talk about it, but the weight remained. No noticed too. He recognized the silent ache, the unspoken hurt. Kids like him knew that the deepest wounds rarely made noise. One evening, after Lily's session, No found her sitting alone on the balcony. She wasn't crying, just staring at the city like she was trying to understand her place in it. He walked quietly toward her, not wanting to startle her. "You okay?" he asked. She nodded, then shook her head. "I don't know." "That's okay," No said, sitting beside her. "You don't have to know." Lily pulled her knees up to her chest as much as her strength allowed. "Dad won't tell me everything," she whispered. "I know something bad happened. I know someone put that plan in my room, and I know he's scared to tell me why." No hesitated. Ethan had protected her from the truth so far, but Lily was too smart to ignore what she sensed. "What do you think happened?" No asked gently. She thought for a long moment. "I think someone wanted to hurt Dad, and they hurt me instead." No felt a tightness in his chest. "You're not the reason it happened," he said. "None of it was your fault." "But it still happened to me," she whispered. No nodded slowly. "Yeah, it did, and that really sucks, but you still here, you fighting, and you not alone." She leaned her head against his shoulder. "I'm glad you here," she murmured. For a moment, No froze. He wasn't used to being leaned on. Not physically, not emotionally, yet something inside him softened. "I'm glad too," he said quietly, "more than I can say." When Ethan saw them from inside, his chest tightened, not with worry but with gratitude. No wasn't just helping Lily walk again. He was helping her find pieces of joy, trust, and comfort. Ethan stepped back before they noticed him watching, feeling something form in him that he hadn't expected, the sense of a family expanding. Not by blood, but by choice. A few days later, Gray visited the penthouse in the evening with updates on Veronica's case. Ethan met him privately in the study. "Her trial will move quickly," Gray said. "The evidence is solid. Harold already confessed. He claims Veronica pushed him into it emotionally, promised him money and favors." Ethan rubbed his forehead. "And Lily? Her name will stay out of the press," Gray promised. "I made sure of that." The court agreed, given her age and condition. Ethan exhaled in relief. Good. When Gray left, Ethan stood alone in the quiet study. He looked at a framed photo of Lily as a toddler, smiling, wrapped in a blanket, reaching out toward him. He thought about the nightmare he had escaped, the betrayal he was still processing, and the fragile healing happening in the next room. Then he thought about No, a boy with no home, no family, no stability, who had walked into their lives with nothing but a warning and a heart big enough to save a stranger's child. Ethan made a decision that would shape all of their futures. When he stepped out of the study, he found No sitting with Lily on the couch, reading to her from a graphic novel. She was leaning comfortably against him, her eyes heavy with sleep. Ethan approached, voice soft. "No, can I talk to you for a moment?" The boy looked up sharply, nervous out of habit. "Did I do something wrong?" "No," Ethan said with a gentle smile. "Not at all." He gestured toward the balcony, and Noah followed him outside. The city stretched before them, lights glittering like scattered stars. Ethan took a breath. "You've become important here," he said. "Important to Lily, and important to me." No blinked, startled. "I don't want you going back to the streets," Ethan continued. "Not now, not ever. You have a place here, No. If you want it." The boy's breath hitched. A place. A home. A life beyond survival. He could barely whisper the words, "I want it." Ethan placed a steady hand on his shoulder. "Then stay, be part of this family. We need you just as much as you need us." No nodded, his eyes burning not with pain but with something warm and new. Something that felt dangerously close to belonging. The days that followed No's decision to stay did not simply pass, they transformed. It was as if the penthouse, once filled with quiet dread and medical routines, was slowly learning how to breathe again. And in that space of fragile healing, something new began to form, a rhythm that felt surprisingly close to family life. Not perfect, not polished, but real. Lily improved a little more each day, now taking steps without the parallel bars, clinging to Ethan's forearm or No's shoulder for support. Sometimes she stumbled, but instead of crying, she laughed, soft, breathless laughs that filled the room with warmth. No celebrated each small victory as though it were a miracle, because to him it was. For a boy who had spent years surviving in the cracks of the city, witnessing someone win a battle against darkness felt like seeing the world be kind for once. Ethan watched them constantly. The bond forming between his daughter and this boy who had once walked the streets alone wasn't something he had expected. But it felt right, natural, as if their lives had been waiting for each other. He saw how No supported Lily without smothering her, how he gave her space to grow but always stayed close enough to catch her. It reminded Ethan of something he once believed in, the idea that love wasn't always loud or born from blood. Sometimes it grew quietly in the moments no one else saw. One afternoon, after a particularly successful therapy session, Lily surprised both Ethan and No by standing without assistance for nearly 20 seconds. Her legs shook violently and sweat gathered at her temples, but her face shone with triumph. "Dad!"
Noah!
"Look!" she cried. Ethan's heart nearly burst. No cheered so loudly that Lily giggled and almost lost her balance. Ethan rushed forward, but she raised her hand. "I got it," she whispered, steadying herself again. That moment, those 20 shaky seconds, felt like reclaiming a year's worth of stolen hope. Later that day, No went to the guest room to change into fresh clothes Ethan had bought for him. He stared at the stack of neatly folded shirts and jeans sitting on the bed. He touched them carefully, almost reverently. It had been years since anyone had bought him clothes. Years since something brand new belonged to him. For a long minute he stood there, feeling an ache in his chest he didn't quite understand. Gratitude, maybe. Fear, definitely. He wondered if he deserved all of this. If he deserved to stay, if he deserved a family. The thought scared him, but staying scared him less than leaving. Meanwhile, Ethan sat in the living room, thinking about the future with a clarity he hadn't felt since before Lily got sick. He had spent so much of his life controlling everything, building walls around himself, believing that strength came from distance and discipline. But No had cracked those walls without even trying, and Lily's recovery had shattered the rest. He realized something profound. Strength wasn't about being untouchable. It was about allowing connection, allowing vulnerability, allowing others into the spaces where fear lived. He looked toward Lily's room, where she rested peacefully, then toward the hallway where No's door was slightly open. And for the first time in many years, Ethan allowed himself to imagine a bigger life, one filled with people who mattered. Not for what they offered him, but for who they were. That evening, when the sun dipped behind the skyline, turning the windows gold, Ethan gathered No and Lily in the dining room. The table wasn't set formally. There were simple plates, bowls of pasta, and a small chocolate cake Lily had begged for. It felt cozy, intimate, just the three of them sharing a meal without ceremony. Lily took a bite of pasta and grinned. "Dad, this is actually good." Ethan laughed. "I'm improving," he said. "Don't get used to it." No ate quietly but comfortably, finally letting himself relax into the warmth of the space. Halfway through dinner, Ethan cleared his throat. "I want to talk to both of you," he said. Lily looked up immediately. Noah's fork in hand, suddenly alert. "I've been thinking," Ethan continued, "about what happened, about everything we've been through, and about where we go from here." Noah's pulse quickened. He feared the words that might follow. Fear of rejection was a familiar bruise. "Lily," Ethan said gently, turning to his daughter, "you recovering, you refighting. I'm beyond proud of you." She smiled, cheeks pink. "Thanks, Dad." Then Ethan turned to No. "And you came into our lives at the worst moment. And somehow you made everything better." No froze, the words hitting him harder than he expected. "You helped save her," Ethan said. "But you also helped save me." Silence settled around them, warm instead of heavy. No's throat tightened. "I just did what anyone should do," he whispered. "No," Ethan replied firmly. "Most people wouldn't. Most people didn't. You did." Lily nodded vigorously. "No's my hero," she said. No's eyes burned with emotion he fought to hide. "I've been thinking about something important," Ethan continued. "Something that would give all of us a future. Something that feels right." No's breath caught. No matter what came next, it mattered. Ethan took a deep breath. "No, I want to make this official. If you want it, I'd like to begin the process of becoming your guardian." Time stopped. Lily gasped, nearly dropping her fork. No stared at Ethan, eyes wide, stunned into stillness. He opened his mouth, but no sound came out. Ethan leaned forward. "You deserve safety," he said. "You deserve a home. You deserve a family. Let us be that family." No's vision blurred. Nobody had ever said words like that to him, not once. He tried to speak, but emotion clogged his throat. Lily crawled down from her chair and took his hand. "Please stay," she whispered. "You were my best friend." Ethan reached out and placed a steady hand on No's shoulder. "You don't have to decide right now," he said softly. "But I want you to know the door is open, and it always will be." No looked between them, this man who had shown him trust and respect, and this girl who had trusted him with her healing. Something inside him cracked open, a place long locked by fear and loneliness. Tears welled in his eyes before he could stop them. But these weren't tears of pain. They were tears of someone finally being seen, someone finally being wanted. "I want that," he whispered. "I want to stay." Lily threw her arms around him. Ethan smiled, the weight of months lifting from his chest. In that moment, the three of them weren't simply survivors of trauma, they were becoming something new. A family built not by blood, but by choice, courage, and the kind of love that arrives when the world least expects it. Weeks passed, and the Walker Penthos slowly transformed from a quiet place of recovery into a home filled with small, tender moments, one so simple and ordinary that they became extraordinary. It wasn't dramatic or sudden. It was the gradual stitching together of three lives that had been torn apart in different ways, now finding new strength in one another. Lily continued her therapy with unwavering determination, her steps gaining stability and confidence each day. She no longer needed someone to hold her constantly. Sometimes she walked across the room with only a hand hovering near her for reassurance. Each step she took felt like a victory shared by all three of them. Ethan cheered for her with a proud father's heart, and No watched with awe, knowing he had witnessed her at her weakest and was now watching her rise. Every morning, Lily asked if No could practice with her first before the therapist arrived. And every morning, No was there, patient, focused, gentle, guiding her with the steady presence she had grown to trust more than anything. Their bond became unbreakable, forged not by convenience but by survival. Meanwhile, Ethan dove into the process of making No's place in their home official. Calls to lawyers, paperwork, background checks that led nowhere because No's past was a blur of shelters and forgotten places. Ethan handled it all with determination. He wanted to give No something no one had ever given him: stability. A future, a name he could claim without fear. No watched him work tirelessly, unsure how to process the idea that someone was fighting for him instead of against him. He would sit quietly on the couch as Ethan talked to attorneys and social workers, pretending to read a book but listening to every word. Every time Ethan said "my son" during a conversation, No's heart tightened in a way he didn't understand. It felt like gaining a heartbeat he never knew he was missing. One afternoon, after a particularly intense therapy session in which Lily managed to walk from the living room to her bedroom without stopping, Ethan decided to take them outside for the first time in months. Not to a hospital, not to a doctor's office, but to Central Park, the real world, life beyond fear. They walked together, Ethan beside Lily, Noah hovering protectively just behind. Lily's steps were uneven but strong enough to carry her across patches of grass and winding stone paths. She looked around with amazement, as if the world had suddenly doubled in size. Everything seemed brighter, louder, more alive. Even the birds sounded different. "I forgot how big everything is," she said, laughing breathlessly. "It feels like everything waited for me." No shoved his hands in his pockets, smiling at her. "That's because you make it look better," he said simply. Ethan glanced at him with a warmth he no longer bothered to hide. They found a quiet spot near the lake, where the water rippled with sunlight. Ethan spread a blanket across the grass, and Lily sat down carefully, her legs tired but proud of the distance she had managed. No helped her with her water bottle, the way an older brother might, though neither of them said the words out loud. Ethan sat across from them, leaning back on his hands, soaking in the moment, a moment he didn't dare dream about. When Lily's condition first worsened, she was alive, healing, laughing. And No was sitting beside her, a boy who once believed he didn't belong anywhere, now fitting seamlessly into the picture. As the afternoon stretched on, Lily picked up small stones and tried to skip them across the lake. No tried too, showing her the flick of the wrist he'd learned from a kid he used to know near the river. Ethan watched the two of them bond with the ease of siblings who had grown up together. Something inside him shifted. This wasn't just temporary, this wasn't charity, this was an obligation. This was home for all three of them. When the sun began to set, they made their way back to the Penthos. Lily fell asleep early that night, exhausted from the day's excitement. Ethan covered her with a blanket and brushed her hair gently, then stepped out of the room to find No sitting on the sofa, looking anxious. "Are we still doing it?" No asked, the question small but heavy. "The adoption stuff." Ethan sat beside him. "Yes," he replied without hesitation. "I meant every word." No's gaze drifted down. "What if they don't let me stay?" "They will," Ethan said firmly, "and even if it takes time, even if they make it difficult, I'm not giving up. I told you the door is open, it stays open." No's eyes glistened, but he blinked the moisture away quickly. "People don't usually fight for me." Ethan rested a hand on his shoulder. "Then let me be the first." No swallowed hard, his chest tight, not from fear but from something he had never felt so strongly before. Safety worth family. Days later, a letter arrived confirming the first official step in the guardianship process. Ethan read it out loud at the breakfast table. Lily clapped with joy, nearly spilling her cereal. No stared at the letter, stunned, as though reading proof of something he had dared not believe. "It's real," Ethan told him. "This is the beginning." No touched the edge of the paper, hands trembling. Thank you, he whispered, voice cracking. Ethan shook his head. You don't thank family, he said softly. You just stay and grow. And live. That night after Lily fell asleep, No stood on the balcony overlooking New York. The city lights sparkled like stars fallen to the earth, stretching endlessly in every direction. For the first time in his life, the world didn't feel cold or hostile, it felt wide, possible. Ethan joined him, silent for a moment. You know, he said, when you came my door that night, I thought you were just a hungry kid with a warning. No gave a small smile. I was, Ethan chuckled, maybe. But you became more than that. You saved my daughter. You saved me from losing her. And you showed me how to open my heart again. No looked down at the street below. I didn't do it for anything in return, he whispered. I know, Ethan said. That's what makes it matter so much. They stood together in the quiet night air, the wind carrying the sounds of the city far below. And in that moment, the weight of the past loosened its grip, replaced by something gentler, something hopeful. No wasn't just surviving anymore. He was becoming part of something lasting. Lily wasn't just healing. She was finding joy again. And Ethan wasn't just a father fighting for his child. He was a man who had found a son. The three of them broken, bruised, but brave, had built a family from the ruins of fear and the ashes of betrayal. Not because fate forced them together, but because love found them anyway. In the end, the story of Ethan, Lily, and No teaches that family is not defined by blood, genetics, or shared last names, but by the courage to show up for one another when the world becomes heavy. Ethan learned that protection is not just about wealth, power, or the ability to control everything. It is about being present, listening, and accepting that vulnerability is not a weakness but a doorway to connection. For years he believed he could shield Lily from anything simply by working harder or building bigger walls. Yet the person who entered his life and helped save his daughter was a boy he barely knew, a child with no home, no parent, no safety net. Through No, Ethan discovered that sometimes strength appears in unexpected forms, wearing threadbare clothes and carrying a past filled with scars. That realization reshaped him, teaching him humility and reminding him that every human being, no matter how small or fragile they may seem, carries a potential for greatness when given a chance to care for someone else. No's journey reveals a different lesson, one about the resilience of the human heart. He lived most of his life believing he wasn't worth keeping, that he was disposable, forgettable, something the world tolerated only because it didn't know what else to do with him. Yet when he stepped into Ethan's home and saw Lily suffering, something inside him responded, not out of obligation, but out of compassion. The story teaches that kindness does not come from privilege or comfort. It grows from struggle, from knowing what pain feels like and refusing to let others drown in it. No proves that even someone who has been abandoned repeatedly can choose to be loyal. Even someone who has lost everything can still offer hope. And sometimes the ones who have the least to give end up giving the most. His transformation from a nameless street kid to a beloved son reminds us that belonging is not earned through perfection but through honesty, bravery, and love freely given. Lily's experience teaches another profound truth, that healing is not just physical. Her recovery shows that strength is not measured by muscles or mobility, but by the courage to reclaim pieces of yourself after someone tried to destroy them. She went through fear, confusion, and betrayal deeper than she fully understood, yet her spirit endured. Her small steps, first 2, then 4, then across the living room, act as symbolic reminders that progress does not require perfection. You just need to keep moving, even if your legs shake. She reminds us that healing takes time, support, and hope, and that sometimes the greatest victories are found in the smallest actions. Lily's trust in No also sends a message that children often see the truth of people more clearly than adults do. They can sense goodness not through wealth or reputation, but through presence, sincerity, and heart. Lily teaches that even when life breaks you, it can also rebuild you using unexpected hands. But woven through all of this is a darker lesson: the dangerous power of resentment. Veronica's choices show how bitterness, when left unchecked, can twist a person into someone they no longer recognize. Her pain was real, but instead of healing, she nurtured her anger until it grew into something destructive. Her attempt to hurt Ethan by harming Lily reflects a universal truth: when hurt is ignored, it spreads. When anger is allowed to fester, it becomes capable of destroying innocent lives. The story serves as a warning that emotional wounds need attention, honesty, and accountability. Without those, even the people we once loved most can become the source of our greatest danger. Veronica teaches us not about villainy, but about what happens when we let blame replace responsibility. When we let loss turn into spite rather than growth. Her downfall is tragic, not because she was evil, but because she chose the wrong path when offered countless opportunities to heal. Ultimately, the story teaches that redemption often arrives quietly through kindness, through unexpected bonds, through second chances. No didn't save Lily because someone ordered him to. He didn't step into Ethan's world because he wanted anything in return. He did it because compassion is a powerful force, even in those who have been hurt the most. His presence reminds us that every person we meet carries a story we cannot see, and sometimes the ones society overlooks have the greatest capacity to love and protect. Ethan's willingness to take no in, to see beyond his rough edges, to offer him a home and a future, teaches that generosity is more than charity. It is seeing someone's worth before they see it themselves. And Lily, with her resilience and innocence, becomes the bridge that binds them together, proving that even after betrayal, new beginnings are possible. The story shows that family is built, not inherited, love is chosen, not guaranteed, healing is shared, not solitary, and trust, once broken, can still be rebuilt when people decide to turn toward one another instead of away. The most powerful lesson is that life's darkest moments often become the soil from which new hope grows. Ethan found a son. No found a home. Lily found strength. And together, they turned a tragedy into something remarkable, a reminder that even the most broken pieces can come together to form something whole, warm, and enduring. If you found this content helpful, don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on the notification bell so you won't miss any of my latest videos. If you have any ideas or topics you'd like me to cover, leave a comment below. I always read all your comments.